Right. Hi, microphones, they have a purpose. So, I want to talk about becoming unrecognizable and instability as a creative force. And I want to start with a question. Are you unrecognizable to a past self? Likely, in a multitude of ways. And another question, is this current iteration of you able to know all of your future selves? Many of us spend our lives trying to shape and become a projection of self, as though somewhere ahead there's a version waiting for us that we're molding ourselves into, the one who has finally arrived or finally understands themselves, or the one we were waiting for in the mirror. And if they do arrive, they molt and morph into someone else. So if you would please ask yourself the earnest question and then listen. Who am I? Okay, allow that response to float on down the river. Thank you. Goodbye. Now, thinking about how that arrived, notice, what was the speed? What was the force? Was it a feather? Was it an elephant? With which your mind answered. Did you notice the texture of its arrival? The color? The shape? What was the story arc? Was there sound? Now let's allow all of those noticings to pass on by down the river. Thank you. Goodbye. For most of us, that first response is often quick, whether it's got an answer or a non answer. So now ask yourself, who isn't at that table? What element of self didn't speak up? What did you not hear because it isn't being said in words? For me, a more interesting question is, who keeps asking? What what culture, what experiences taught me to ask that question? And I ask because, what if you were becoming larger than the imagination that first created you? Than the imagination that's able to create you into the future from here? I don't know about you, but for me, the deepest thresholds have asked me to become completely unrecognizable to the person who I thought I knew I was. And that instability can feel like losing oneself. Artists know something about this. Anything worth creating spends part of its life, often a lot of its life, looking unfinished. I call it the mess of the process or the guts. I'm in the guts. Maybe maybe that's simply what composition looks like from the inside. Ew, all tangle and mess. But this is an inquiry in staying with the mess and not rushing through it, but trusting the magic of what's happening where you can't see, where you don't know, because often that's the part where it's changing the most. We often talk about finding ourselves, but I think a lot of artists rarely describe the creative process that way, or at least so many of the artists I've spoken to. The creative process so often reaches a moment where the work begins making demands the artist never intended. So the song asks for a different rhythm, or the choreography refuses the original plan. The poem starts speaking in a voice unexpected, or the melody begins to write itself. At some point, the work becomes wiser than the maker. What if identity works the same way? What if we are less the architects of ourselves than participants in a composition that is still unfolding? We often imagine thresholds as doorways, an image. Think of an image of a doorway, literally the threshold that you walk across. Words have limitations because we associate them with something, but they are not the thing. They're simply an association. So if you are associating a threshold merely with a doorway, that is something you cross. There's a before and after you're done, you're through. Doors are designed to get you somewhere. But thresholds are designed to change the one who's crossing. So I want to separate out those two for this talk. Consider a threshold not as a doorway, but as a piece of music. Let's go with that. So you don't simply move through a piece of music. That is one way. And also, it's an opportunity to enter into relationship with it. You listen, you respond. Think of it as a concert. You can passively receive, just listen to the music, or you can actively receive, let it roll through you, feel the pulsation of it. You can notice what's going on in your body. You can pull in the sensations of everything around you. You can move, you can dance, you can be with it. There's so many ways to play within that threshold. And sometimes it's just for a single breath, a threshold. Sometimes it's for a season. Maybe it's for years. A song isn't created by holding one perfect note forever. That would be an alarm. But it comes alive through movement. A song has tension and release, dissonance and harmony, silence and sound. So imagine composing a life that way too, an identity. Stability, it preserves, museums preserve, and instability composes. Life composes. Now we need stability. It gives us somewhere to rest, that door frame to lean against, somewhere to remember, to belong. That this isn't an either or, it's an and also. But we can confuse coherence with completion, and those are not the same thing. So a song can be coherent long before it's over. That's why every little thing eventually becomes unstable. Otherwise, it couldn't become anything else. If the tree doesn't die, then we don't have the mushrooms. A birthing necessitates a death. What can only instability create? One reason instability feels so difficult is that we've become extraordinarily skilled at finding exits. So you may be watching this and you are mentally reorganizing your drawer. Zoom, I'm out of here. We're great at that. And we live in a culture that rewards conclusions, right? So finished products, clear identities, success stories, before and after photos. We rarely celebrate the person who is magnificently, inconveniently still becoming. We want to solve it. We want to name it, heal it, optimize it, produce something from it, explain it, turn it into a lesson. We rush to the chorus before we're listening to the verse, and then we wonder why the song feels thin. We reach for resolution because resolution feels like safety. Many of us have been raised in cultures that have groundwater built in Abrahamic laws that tell us to ascend is greater than to descend. But in fact, we need an entire cycle. The breath comes in and it goes out. We're born, we die. So, what if intensity isn't asking for an exit? What if it's asking to be accompanied? And not because intensity is inherently good, but because some songs cannot be hurried. It may be the intensity of stillness. Songs reveal themselves only to those willing to stay and keep listening. So what if change isn't something life asked us to survive? What if change is one of life's primary creative forces? That can be a world shift. What does the Jacob's ladder look like when stability arises and instead of saying, "Oh, I've got to get through this and survive," we also and said, "This is a creative force." How does that affect the rest of our decisions as we move through and with and accompany that change, that instability, that creative force? Sometimes we imagine that creativity only belongs to artists, but creativity is simply what life is doing all the time. It's the pulsation of cycle through forests, through rivers, through bodies and desire, through grief and joy, through gender, through us, a constant pulse. So, what if instead of asking whether we're changing, we ask whether we can hear the composition while we're still inside the song? And maybe better yet, can we keep singing before we know how it ends. That's music, that's comedy, that's gender, that's being alive. Some contemplative questions, if you wanna play with, I'll put them in the description, but one would be, what are you trying to finish that might actually still be composing itself? And are you mistaking a threshold for a doorway? Where might life be composing something your current story cannot yet imagine? What might accompanying that change look like rather than solving it? I would love to hear your thoughts. These aren't these aren't things that I've figured out. They're not things I came up with on my own. They're great questions of wonder, and I mean that with an A and an O. I don't know that there are answers, but there are experiences that can be born. There are pulsations and movements and thresholds in which we can test them out and play. So if you find yourself playing in a threshold, I would love to hear about it. I hope you are well.